I want to welcome two commissioners from the President's Oil Spill Commission, Don Boesch, who's president of the Center for Environmental Sciences at the University of Maryland, and Frances Beinecke, who is also president of the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you so much for joining us. Talk a little bit about your findings. I just want to get your sense, and let me ask you first, Don, about the kind of support or the lack of support from some Republicans to some of the findings versus what you really expected when you were going through all this, making your recommendations in your report.
Well, our recommendations cover a whole range of things, from environmental effects to industry changes, governmental regulation, and we always understood that when our report was finally out that not everyone would be pleased and happy with all of the recommendations. Having said that, the report's just out. I would caution to prejudgment, so that when the report's read and we're able to brief Congress and the like, and we're looking for ways, practical ways to get some of our goals accomplished, I think we can accomplish those and improve the safety of the industry, and not in a way that's unduly costly to the industry or the American consumer, and result in a much safer oil and gas industry in the Gulf.
Here are some of the reactions, some of the comments that we're hearing from Chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, Doc Hastings. Any proposals that could delay energy production are going to be viewed very skeptically. Fred Upton, who's the chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, he's talking about rising gas prices, worries about foreign oil dependence. Both of them and many others are talking that they want drilling to resume in a timely manner. They're talking about jobs. They want people to get back to work. Also, 30% of our oil comes from the Gulf, is what they're saying. So, are you optimistic drilling can resume in a timely manner as well as in a safe manner?
I think we are. The recommendations that we make are not intended to slow operations down. They're intended to approach operations differently. We really emphasize safety. We think that's first and foremost, that people who work in the Gulf are safe and that the Gulf resource is protected. So there's no proposal on our part that things be done, that it takes longer to do things. But I do think that we have a very strong recommendation that things should be done differently. This was a colossal disaster to the entire Gulf of Mexico, not only the oil and gas industry, to the fishing industry, to the tourist industry. That can't happen again. And we looked at what are the things that need to take place to ensure it doesn't happen again. And I hope that the chairman of the committees will take that for what it was intended to, how to make the safest operation possible.
One of the big issues that's being brought up here from some of the skeptics is the finding that this was a systemic problem throughout the industry. Joe Barton, who's the chairman emeritus of the Energy and Commerce Committee, said on Energy Now, "I would take issue with the word systemic. I would think more that they had gotten lax because they had such a long-term success ratio." How did you get from these poor management decisions and technical problems with 3 companies to systemic problems throughout the entire industry?
Well, first of all, if the industry in general becomes lax because of their success, that's a systemic problem. What we found was that there were 3 companies, both in all cases, some of the major players, not only in the Gulf of Mexico but throughout the world in deepwater drilling, that were involved in this. And these service companies, Halliburton and Transocean, also service other companies as well. There were 79 loss of well control incidents in the Gulf of Mexico over the last 15 years. None is disastrous as the BP well, but these problems are there. They happen, and they affect major companies as well as independent companies. We recognize that there are some companies that are exemplary in their safety practices. This doesn't mean to paint them with the same brush, but to recognize they're all part of the same industry. And it's in their best interest, the responsible companies, to make sure that the less responsible companies are up to the high standards that they operate under. So in that sense, we think the problem is systemic and the solutions need to be systemic.
14,000 wells have been drilled successfully. Do you believe that does say something about the rigorousness of the safety procedures so far?
First of all, it's an incredibly sophisticated industry. They do operate at the highest engineering levels. We were very impressed by that. What we're trying to ensure is that there aren't a set of circumstances similar to Deepwater Horizon. They're operating in ever more challenging environments, further and further offshore, deeper and deeper water, more challenging geology. That's really what we looked at. Those 14,000 wells, only a minority of those are in the deep water. So our recommendations are really geared towards What do you do in the ever more challenging environments, and how do you ensure you have a culture of safety that includes continuous improvement and operating at the highest standards? I think this is a public resource. That's what the public expects, and that's what we recommend.
Did you, during these 6 months, did you speak to executives and workers at those 3 companies as well as other companies around the industry?
Our general counsel spoke extensively to those 3 companies as well as to other companies, and we spoke to many, many companies in the process.
Fred Upton said he is disappointed the commission did not answer the fundamental question of what went wrong. And he said lessons are not going to be learned, and therefore without clear evidence, with the tens of thousands of wells that have been successful, the lessons will not be learned needed to ensure disaster doesn't happen again. Do you think you didn't
I
find?
respectfully ask Mr. Upton to read the report. There is, in great detail, step by step,
what went wrong?
exposition
It's
of
in
exactly what went wrong.
Chapter 4 goes through it in great detail.
Mr. Graham is very concerned that these recommendations are not going to be followed. They're going to require action from Congress and from the President and from industry. Do you worry now where your findings will go after all this work?
Well, first and foremost, there are a lot of recommendations that can be adopted by the administration at the executive level. We hope that will happen. We met with the President, delivered the report, made that recommendation, and I think that he is taking that under consideration with his cabinet members. Clearly, we'd like Congress to act. We've made these recommendations. We think this will improve the operations offshore in the Gulf and potentially elsewhere if they go forward. They need to be acted on, and so we hope Congress will look at them.
In the current makeup of Congress,
way.
do you see that happening?
Well, we didn't. We made these recommendations based on what we think needs to happen. I think that and particularly for the industry wanting to go back to work, they should be advocates for these recommendations. It's in their interest because they want to be at work in the Gulf and potentially elsewhere, and so they should be the strongest proponents.
So next up, what do you expect from these committee hearings coming up where the co-chairmen will be testifying?
Well, I think they're testifying both in the Senate with the Democratic leadership as well as in the House, and I think we're approaching it the same way in both cases. We're going to try to explain what we found and explain what our recommendations are about how to make this industry safer, how to protect the environment and protect life, and how it can be done in a responsible way, not only by government, but by industry. The industry is already taking steps. They've formed a corporation to contain deepwater blowouts, and I think they will take our recommendation to form a safety institute.
What are we looking at if they don't take your recommendations?
I think what you look at is potentially further risks in the Gulf. That's something the Gulf of Mexico and the 4 states and the thousands of people can't afford. So I hope they take the recommendations to heart.
11 men died in this accident that your report found was foreseeable and preventable. What do you think is the best way to honor their memories?
Well, we dedicate our report to them, and I think it's always incumbent in our minds, and I think in the minds of those people in Congress, to recognize what we want to do is to prevent an additional 11 people from having the same fate. This is about protecting the environment, but it's also very fundamentally about protecting human lives.
All right, Don Boesch, Frances Beinecke, thanks so much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.